President Donald Trump gave the longest convention acceptance speech in history Thursday night. When all was said and done, it clocked in at an hour and 32 minutes. Trump began by speaking of unity and recounting his near assassination. He then drifted to familiar talking points, attacking the Biden administration over its policies on the economy and on immigration. Trump made more than 20 false claims by our count. He also outlined some of his economic proposals too. Trump said he would bring prices down by encouraging more fossil fuel production. Indeed, several stocks that stand to gain from deregulation have risen this week. Take a look at these shares in the energy sector. The former president also mentioned auto manufacturing. As he has many times before, Trump said he'd impose massive tariffs if companies don't build their factories in the United States.
Those plants are going to be built in the United States, and our people are going to man those plants. And if they don't agree with us, we'll put a tariff of approximately 100 to 200% on each car, and they will be unsellable in the United States.
Brian Gardner is the chief Washington policy strategist at Stifel and joins us now. They have very different policies, Biden at this moment versus a future Trump presidency, whether it's tax, spending, trade, immigration. First and foremost, Brian, how much time and attention are you spending looking at a potential Trump win versus a Republican clean sweep where they take the House and the Senate as well? Because that will make a difference for policy decisions.
It will. I mean, I think you could have made an argument before the debate that you could see split government, Trump winning, probably Republicans taking the House, and you could make a reasonable argument that Democrats could still flip the Senate, flip the House back, so you'd have divided government. I think that argument has been diminished since the debate, and so if Trump wins, I think it's probably a clean sweep. And so, yeah, I'm leaning a little bit more of my time into the clean sweep scenario than a divided government scenario.
And so then talk us through policy first and foremost. I think the individual tax cuts are expected to be extended. Where next do you think he'll have most impact in terms of the policy decisions that he's talked about, at least imposing?
Well, don't sleep on the tax debate. That's just because it's going to be a Republican sweep doesn't mean that it's an automatic across-the-board extension of those tax cuts and everything else is status quo. I mean, that is going to be a very complicated debate as Republicans become more working class, more populist. And so that is going to be a very consequential debate in 2025 and 26. Other sectors, other issues that he's going to look at, energy is going to be a big one. The supply of labor, immigration is going, and border security is probably going to be job one when he comes in. On the trade side, China tariffs will be first. Global tariffs, other tariffs on other nations, that will probably be slower, but is probably coming, later in the first year.
Okay, so talk about the implications of both of those then. If he's putting limits on illegal immigration and strengthening the border, that's one thing. If he's increasing immigration controls of all forms, and that does have, in many respects, other knock-on impacts, whether that's the ability to find labor, whether that's potential pressure on wages as well, Brian. What are your expectations? Because all of these are potentially inflationary.
So, there was a day when I think Republicans, even when they were arguing against illegal immigration and arguing in favor of greater border security, were still open to the argument of more flexibility on legal immigration.
Right.
I think that argument has less sway in the Republican Party than it used to. And so despite the calls from business leaders to ease up and give more flexibility on legal immigration and work visas, I'm not sensing that there's a big move in that direction among Republicans. So I don't think there's going to be a further clamping down on legal immigration. But I don't see a loosening of the number of visas either.
Okay, interesting. What about climate this time around? There's going to be all sorts of conversations, I think, particularly in light of what we're talking about with AI, with the need for data center growth, with whether you're using fossil fuels to fuel that or renewable energies. There's going to be demand for more in many respects, and perhaps more than we're anticipating. And now we're in a situation where he's got the likes of Elon Musk potentially financing and helping finance the campaign. He's got big tech support that feeds in from JD Vance. How do you expect, whether it's climate or technology, to feature in the administration if he wins?
Well, you just have to come to my neck of the woods, the Washington, D.C. suburbs out in Northern Virginia, which is chock full of data centers,
Right.
drawing energy on various plants throughout the region and putting pressure on the grid. So, I mean, for Trump and for most Republicans, they don't look at climate as an existential threat. It's a longer term issue that they're willing to, I think, talk about. But in the short term, it's really about reinvigorating American manufacturing and opening up energy. And so it's more of a short-term focus than a longer-term focus. So when you say climate, I don't think that climate policies per se are going to be a big consideration, at least in the short term, for a Trump administration.
I think eyebrows were raised this week when you had the head of one of the biggest unions in the country talking, and there was some element of disquiet. Again, it plays to the vice presidential pick, JD Vance, and the sort of Labour support. Brian, how is that going to feature in policy, and is that going to be popular perhaps with bigger business, even if it's popular with individual workers?
Yeah, this is probably a longer conversation for another time, but to shorten it up, there's a realignment going on in the country, right? Working class voters have been moving to the Republican Party for the last 20 years. That has accelerated since Trump came to office. It continues today. And Republicans are looking to make inroads. They've made inroads with non-union blue collar. Now they're looking to peel off union workers, union members. And so the JD Vance pick certainly leans into that. And it also then affects policy going forward. I mentioned the tax debate. This is why the tax debate is not going to be a clean debate of just simply extending all those tax cuts. Republicans, who are now more populist, representing poorer districts, are not going to spend a lot of political capital on keeping the top income tax rate where it is today. They could let it reset. As they look at the budget and trying to close the budget gap and offset the extension of those tax cuts, the corporate tax becomes much more interesting to them. And despite Mr. Trump calling for a 15% corporate tax rate and a further cut of the corporate rate, there are a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill who say 21 is probably too low, And if they're looking for money, a 24-25% corporate tax rate might be in play.
Yeah, none of this is mutually exclusive, and particularly if you want to try and restrain government spending in some way, this is going to be a challenging game plan to put together. Just very quickly, what are you saying to investors today? Is it too early to position on anything with regards to
No,
this?
I don't think so. I mean,
Okay.
I actually think it's quite late. To be honest with you, I mean, everybody's been saying for months, there's 6 months to go, there's 5 months to go, and a lot could change. I disagree with that. I think it's very late in the campaign. You have two candidates who are very well known to American voters. This is Donald Trump's third straight election. If Joe Biden is, in fact, the Democratic nominee, it will be his fourth time on the national ticket in the last 6 elections. Voters know both candidates.
Right.
And that's why the polls have been very stable going back to the fall of 2023. So in terms of positioning, I don't think it's too early because I think we already know quite a bit about the potential outcome of the 2024 election.
Yeah, great point. Brian, great to get your wisdom. I'm sure we'll chat again soon. Brian Gardner there.